Matt, the details of this case are pretty gruesome. Police say Tony Roy, at the time of his death, was an absconder from Parole. They believe he is the one responsible for killing his wife and then cutting up her body and placing her body parts in trash bags.
On July 15, 2023, officers forced open the door of apartment 14B on Kings Lane in Burton, Michigan. What they discovered inside the bathroom would haunt even veteran detectives for years to come. Black trash bags stuffed with human remains. Just 24 hours earlier, 41-year-old Shauna Roy had been alive, preparing to escape a toxic marriage and return to her family. Instead, she was beaten with a metal pipe, strangled with a belt, and methodically dismembered by the man who had vowed to love her. Her killer wasn't a stranger. He wasn't unknown to authorities. He was Tony Roy, a man with 17 felony convictions and a history of violence stretching back decades. A man who, just 3 days before the murder, had been declared an absconder from parole by the Michigan Department of Corrections. A violent predator who slipped through the cracks of a broken system and was left free to commit his most horrific crime yet. Shauna Roy, daughter, mother, friend, dreamer, told her husband she was leaving him. For that act of courage, she paid with her life. Her dismembered body was still in the apartment while her killer fled to Detroit with another woman, potentially his next victim. Tonight, you'll witness the systematic failures that led to Shauna's death. You'll see how Tony Roy manipulated his way into her life while hiding his violent past. You'll learn how a single word in a text message, honey, exposed his deception and led to the discovery of her remains. And you'll watch the final, desperate confrontation where police stopped him before he could claim another life. This isn't just a murder story. This is a failure of justice. This is what happens when we ignore the warning signs of domestic violence. This is what happens when we release violent offenders without proper supervision. This is what happens when we fail to protect women like Shauna Roy. Shauna Roy was born on June 12, 1982, in Saginaw, Michigan, the youngest of 3 children in a close-knit, supportive family. She was known among friends like Dominique as the magnetic heart of every gathering, a woman whose loyalty was unwavering and whose laughter was infectious. Her compassion was not passive, it was the foundation of her life. Shauna attended Delta College, majoring in psychology and social work, driven by a powerful vision. She often spoke about her dream to open an adult foster care home in her hometown. This was her true purpose, creating a genuine safe haven for those in need. She was also a devoted mother to her child from a previous relationship. That instinct for protection and safety was the single most defining characteristic that would later empower her to make the necessary, and ultimately fatal, decision to leave. This was the vibrant, ambitious woman whose path sadly crossed with Tony Roy's deception in 2020. The man who appeared on Shauna's screen in 2020 was carefully crafted, a digital mirage designed to conceal the predator behind it. Tony Roy presented himself as reformed, reflective, even philosophical about his past mistakes. His social media videos showed vulnerability and wisdom that seemed genuine. "I appreciate y'all giving my ratchet ass chance after chance," he said in one video, his voice carrying practiced remorse. "I know I keep hurting people that love me." What Shauna couldn't see was the Michigan Department of Corrections file that told the real story. The 17 felony convictions, assault with intent to do great bodily harm, and multiple domestic violence charges, armed robbery and drug offenses, a pattern of violence stretching back to 1998. This wasn't a man who had made mistakes. This was a predator who had perfected his performance. On July 22, 2022, they married. The mask stayed in place just long enough for the honeymoon photos. Then it began. The control started with questions that seemed like concern. Where are you going? Who are you talking to? Why didn't you answer my call? Each question was a brick in the wall he was building around her. Next came the accusations. Constant, baseless claims of infidelity. Demands to see her phone. Interrogations about her male co-workers. Each accusation tightened the psychological handcuffs. Then came isolation. Friends noticed Shauna's calls became less frequent. then stopped altogether. Family gatherings were missed. Birthdays went uncelebrated. When Dominique finally reached her, Shauna's voice carried a tension that set off immediate alarms. It was like talking to a hostage, Dominique later told police. She was choosing every word carefully, like someone was listening to both sides of the conversation. By early 2023, the physical violence had started. During a rare moment alone, Shauna confided in Dominique about being struck during arguments, about having her movements monitored, about living in constant fear of Tony's explosive rage. "I told her to get out," Dominique said, her voice breaking during the interview. "I begged her to come back to Saginaw where we could protect her." But Tony had already convinced Shauna that leaving would be worse than staying. That she had nowhere to go. That no one would believe her. That he would find her. The breaking point came in July 2023. After a particularly violent episode that left bruises Shauna couldn't hide, she made the decision that would cost her life. She told Tony she was leaving him, returning to Saginaw, to her family, to safety. For Tony Roy, this wasn't just rejection. This was defiance. This was a woman he believed he owned daring to reclaim her freedom. And he would make her pay with her life. July 11, 2023. The first failure. The Michigan Department of Corrections officially declares Tony Roy an absconder from parole. Despite his violent history and 17 felony convictions, no urgent manhunt is launched. No alerts are issued to local law enforcement. No warnings reach Shauna. A predator is loose, and the system that should be tracking him simply files the paperwork and moves on. July 14, 2023. 5:30 p.m. The point of no return. Inside apartment 14B on Kings Lane in Burton, Shauna tells Tony she's leaving for good. She has already contacted family in Saginaw. A room is waiting. A new start is within reach. Neighbors later report hearing raised voices, then a crash, then silence. What happens next will be pieced together by forensic evidence and medical examination. Tony attacks Shauna with his fists. When that isn't enough, he grabs a metal pipe from his work truck. Blows rain down on her head, her torso, her arms raised in desperate defense. As she struggles to breathe, he wraps a belt around her neck and pulls until her body goes limp. The medical examiner will later confirm Shauna died from asphyxiation following blunt force trauma. The attack wasn't quick. It wasn't merciful. It was a prolonged act of dominance and rage. July 14, 2023. 9 p.m. The desecration. With Shauna dead, Tony begins the unthinkable. Using a knife from the kitchen, then a saw from his car, he dismembers her body, methodically destroying the woman who dared to leave him. He stuffs her remains into black trash bags and places them in the bathroom tub. Then, with chilling calm, he begins cleaning the apartment, scrubbing walls and floors in a futile attempt to erase what he's done. July 15, 2023. 10:15 a.m. The deception. Tony picks up Shauna's phone and sends a text to Dominique. "Hey honey, I'm fine. Just been busy with work. Talk later." It's a message designed to buy time, to delay discovery. But it contains a fatal mistake. Dominique stares at her phone, at that single word, honey. In all their years of friendship, Shauna has never once called her that. No emojis. No inside jokes. None of Shauna's usual warmth. In that moment, Dominique knows something is terribly wrong. July 15, 2023. 2:30 p.m. The alarm. Dominique calls Shauna's mother and sister. None of them have heard from Shauna in days. The silence is deafening. Together, they contact Burton police and request an immediate welfare check at the Kings Lane apartment. Something's wrong, Dominique insists. She wouldn't just disappear. Not Shauna. July 15, 2023. 7:20 p.m. The discovery. Officers arrive at apartment 14B. They knock. No response. With growing concern, they force entry into the apartment. What they find will haunt them for the rest of their careers. Blood stains the floors and furniture. Tools lie abandoned near the bathroom. And inside the bathtub, black trash bags contain human remains. Shauna Roy has been dead for nearly 24 hours, while her killer has already fled. July 15th to 17th, 2023. The manhunt. Using cell phone data, police track Tony's movements to Detroit. With him is another woman, someone police believe he may be holding against her will, possibly his next victim. A manhunt begins. Arrest warrants are issued, charging Tony with open murder and mutilation of a dead body. Michigan State Police and Detroit Police Department join the search. July 17th, 2023, 12:15 a.m. The confrontation. Michigan State troopers spot Tony's car near Telegraph Road and 7 Mile Road in Detroit. Inside are Tony and the unidentified woman. As officers approach, Tony pulls out a handgun. He points it first at himself, then turns it toward the female passenger. Roll down the passenger window and drop the gun outside the car, officers shout. Seconds later, multiple shots are fired. Tony Roy is pronounced dead at the scene. The woman suffers minor injuries from shattered glass. In the car, police find Shauna's belongings, her ID, her phone, her purse, direct evidence linking him to her murder. The system that was supposed to protect Shauna failed at every critical juncture. A violent offender with 17 felony convictions was released on parole. When he violated that parole, no urgent action was taken. When he murdered and dismembered his wife, he nearly had time to find his next victim. Shauna Roy is dead not just because of Tony's violence, but because every safeguard that should have protected her collapsed when she needed it most. In the days following Tony's death, investigators continued piecing together the full horror of what happened in apartment 14B. Forensic teams collected blood evidence from walls that had been hastily cleaned. They recovered the tools used in the dismemberment. They traced Tony's movements through cell phone data and surveillance footage. The autopsy confirmed what the crime scene had already revealed. Shauna had died from asphyxiation following blunt force trauma. The dismemberment occurred post-mortem, a final act of desecration against a woman who deserved dignity and respect. For Shauna's family and friends, justice came in the form of Tony's death during the police confrontation. There would be no trial, no lengthy appeals, no painful testimony. But there would also be no opportunity to confront him, to ask the questions that haunt survivors, to see him formally held accountable for his actions. "It's not closure," Dominique said at Shauna's memorial service, her voice steady despite her tears. "There's no such thing when someone is taken like this. But at least he can't hurt anyone else." In the weeks that followed, grief transformed into action. Shauna's family established the Shauna Roy Foundation, dedicated to supporting victims of domestic violence and advocating for parole reform. Purple ribbons, the symbol of domestic violence awareness, appeared on trees and fences throughout Saginaw and Burton. A candlelight vigil drew hundreds of mourners who shared stories of Shauna's kindness, her laughter, her dreams. They spoke not just of what was lost, but of what must change to prevent similar tragedies. From this horror, several critical lessons emerge. First, recognize the red flags. Isolation is the abuser's most powerful weapon. When someone begins cutting you off from friends and family, constantly checking your phone, limiting your movements, these aren't signs of love. They're warning signs of control. Tony systematically separated Shauna from her support network, making escape more difficult with each passing day. If someone you know begins withdrawing after entering a new relationship, reach out persistently. Be the lifeline they might desperately need. Second, verify. Don't trust. Shauna had no knowledge of Tony's extensive criminal history when they married. He deliberately misled her about his past, presenting prison as a transformative experience rather than a pattern of behavior. Before entering serious relationships, especially with someone who has a history of incarceration, verify their claims. Public records are accessible. Court documents exist. Information is protection. Third, demand accountability from the system. How does someone with 17 felony convictions, including violent offenses, receive such minimal supervision that they can simply disappear from parole monitoring without immediate consequences. How many other Tony Roys are out there right now, declared absconders, but not actively pursued? The system's failures aren't just bureaucratic oversights. They're matters of life and death. Call your representatives. Demand parole reform. Support organizations fighting for better monitoring of violent offenders. Fourth, leaving is the most dangerous time. If you or someone you know is planning to leave an abusive relationship, understand that this is when the risk of homicide skyrockets. Safety planning isn't optional. It's essential. Contact domestic violence organizations for guidance, consider legal protection orders, inform trusted friends or family. Have an emergency bag packed, plan escape routes, document threats and abuse. These preparations can make the difference between life and death. Shauna Roy was not a statistic. She was not a headline. She was a daughter who brought joy to her family. A mother who protected her child fiercely. A friend whose laughter lit up rooms. A woman with dreams of creating a safe haven for others. A human being whose life mattered deeply. Her story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about domestic violence, about systemic failures, about the devastating consequences when warning signs go unheeded. But it also reminds us of the power of community, of vigilance, of speaking up when something feels wrong. If this story moved you, please help us continue our mission by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Every view helps amplify Shauna's story and could help prevent another tragedy like it. Every share could reach someone who needs to hear this warning. Every comment builds a community dedicated to breaking the cycle of violence. Say her name. Shauna Roy. Not just today, but every day. In how we protect each other, in how we hold systems accountable, and in how we ensure that her death leads to meaningful change. That is how we truly honor her memory.